The Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, otherwise known as SERAP, is urging President Bola Tinubu to direct the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission to immediately suspend salary increment for political public office holders. SERAP is against the pay rise for political and public office holders in Nigeria, particularly the president, vice president, governors, their deputies, and the country's lawmakers. The group calls on the president to reject the imminent pay rise for politicians and encourage the vice president, governors, and their deputies, as well as lawmakers, to do the same. SERAP also urged President Tinubu to direct the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Lateef Fagbemi, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, to ensure full and effective compliance with the judgment of Justice Chuka Obiazo, directing RMAFC to review downward the salaries and allowances of members of the National Assembly to reflect the economic realities in the country. For more clarity on this decision by SERAP, the Socio-Economic and Accountability Rights Project, urging the president to stop the imminent increment, we are now joined by a guest on the news tonight, Kolawole Oluwadare. He is the Deputy Director of SERAP. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much and good evening. I'm happy to be here.
Great, fantastic. So we know that RMAFC has a legal mandate to review salaries of public officials. But here is SERAP saying that this decision is unlawful and unconstitutional. Help us make sense of that. Why do you say this rise is unconstitutional and unlawful?
Thank you very much. It's very important to understand that it is not the right we're challenging. It is the exercise of that right. The right conferred on public officers and public institutions is discretionary, and sometimes it is mandatory. In this instance, the powers conferred on RMAFC allows it to review and recommend the remuneration, which of course will include salaries and allowances of political office holders and even public officers. And the key word is review. So review can be upward and downward. And in this instance, in our view in SERAP, given the factual circumstances and the various laws that guide the exercise of that power by RMAFC, it would be unlawful for RMAFC to do an upward review at this time. Perhaps if RMAFC wants to act in the best interest of Nigerians, what the RMAFC can do is perhaps do a downward review, not an upward review. And this is not new. RMAFC has attempted to do this some couple of times since democracy started in 1999. And the response has always been the same from Nigerians, saying that it is insensitive and it's uncalled for, given the level of poverty and the remuneration, the take-home of political office holders and even of public officers. And that is why it's important to underscore the term remuneration. In this instance, it would mean what the take-home essentially, not necessarily what RMAFC recommends as salaries and allowances. So for that factual circumstances, these public officers, starting from the president to governors and the deputies, and even members of the National Assembly, take home a lot of money. They earn a lot, as it were, not the bare minimum that RMAFC recommends. So what is the basis of the exercise of RMAFC's power in favor of politicians and public officials? Knowing fully well that also factually, these people earn security votes, they will earn huge amounts of money, millions of naira at the end of their term as what is called pension. So what is the basis really? There is no basis either in law, in fact, for RMAFC at this time to increase the take-home of public office holders or public officers, except, of course, those of judicial officers, which is well-deserved and something that should be done.
Mm. Well, let me stay with you, Mr. Oluwadare. I mean, RMAFC actually argues that it's been more than 2 decades that the take-home, the pay of public officers have been reviewed. What exactly do you have against that? Like you said, yes, I mean, there is a need to, that RMAFC is reviewing it. And it's just a review. RMAFC has only just, begun consultations. Is it not too early for this pushback from SERAP What exactly is wrong with the review without necessarily saying, look, this is the figure we're giving public officers? What's wrong with the review?
The review is wrong in terms of law and fact. And we've seen from the statement put up on RMAFC on its website as a Thursday. According to RMAFC, they've done stakeholder consultations, and they're about to put recommendations from those various stakeholders consultations, which I do not know of, into action. And what is the basis of this review? And like I've said earlier, a downward review will be acceptable, but not an upward review. And a very good example, members of the National Assembly, RMAFC they've had calls to come out in the 2021, also in response to popular advocacy by SERAP and other groups, saying that the amount RMAFC has fixed for members of the National Assembly is well below 2 or 3 million. But we've also seen since then that even the National Assembly, some National Assembly members have come out to say they earn more, sometimes 11, 13 million. So it means that as a matter of fact, members of the National Assembly and even the President or Vice President, I dare say, takes home more than the amount recommended by RMAFC as salaries and allowances, which is why I would prefer to look at these as take-home, meaning that whatever the RMAFC recommends as part of the upward review is only going to add to what these classes of public officers are going to take home, which is more, as it were. So there is no basis. And I've made mention of 2 classes of pay that they also get, which is not within the purview of RMAFC. One is security votes. They run to millions of naira every month that the president, vice president, governors, and the deputies earn. And so there is also the issue of pension that they earn after 4 or 8 years in office. So what is the basis of this review? It will only add to the take-home of these public officers who earn a lot more, and it will impoverish Nigerians. In a country where 70,000 naira, and I'll call it paltry, 70,000 naira is the minimum wage. Everything is costly with increase of fuel and the removal of petrol subsidy. More than 130 million Nigerians poor. What is the basis of this review of these public officers that do not even amount to more than up to 5% of the population? Really, I struggle to see the exercise of RMAFC's powers, as a matter of fact. And in law, when you look at the law that set up RMAFC and guides its conduct, one of the key mandates of RMAFC is to advise the government on fiscal efficiency. How can RMAFC say that increasing the pay that this small percentage of people take home is for fiscal efficiency of Nigeria in growing poverty, deficit, budgetary deficit, and huge loans? I really don't think RMAFC cannot justify this move, either in terms of fact, economics, and even the law that guides its actions.
All right. So, Mr. Oluwadare, you do not buy into the argument of RMAFC when it says when you pay the president of Nigeria about 1.5 million naira a month and the ministers less than that, it is a joke, and that you do not expect them to put their best foot forward. In other words, talking about productivity and what they take home. You also mentioned earlier something about not being the right time. So my first question was, do you accept the argument by RMAFC that it is a joke to pay those amounts to Nigerian officials? And secondly, if you say it's not the right time, when then will it be the right or appropriate time to consider a fair and lawful, review of these salaries?
Thank you very much. If RMAFC says that paying more than ₦1 million to the president and ₦1 million to the ministers is a joke, then what would RMAFC say about the 70,000 minimum wage that a lot of those in civil service earn? And is RMAFC not aware that the president and the minister that they are alluding to, of course, take home more than these amounts that they've stated? RMAFC is aware of that fact. So why does RMAFC want to add to the amount that they take home? So that amount is not small when you look at the total packages that these classes of officials, particularly the president, the vice president, and ministers take home at the end. And that is why we shouldn't look at what they earn simply by what is recommended by RMAFC. We need to look at the totality of what they get, including remuneration. And remuneration would mean a lot of things, including allowances that are not within the purview of RMAFC. So that argument really does not hold water. And I think it would be mischievous on the part of RMAFC to rely on that argument, and it will be playing on the intelligence of millions of Nigerians, particularly the poor and the vulnerable, to rely on that argument to do an upward review of the salaries of the president and ministers and members of the National Assembly. And as to the second question as to when is the right time, definitely not now. And I cannot say when it will be the right time. Perhaps when more than 130 million Nigerians have been lifted out of poverty, as the president has promised during his campaign, perhaps we can have this conversation whether it is the right time. But not now. No, not with the growing deficit, an economy that is stagnant, the growing population of poor people. So how can this be justified? We have a social safety net that is non-existent. More people have fallen into poverty in the past years. It is not really justifiable in any way.
Maybe Nigeria needs to look at the bigger picture in terms of the reward system that can actually curb corruption, whether in public office or in private office. We have to leave it there. Kolawole Oluwadare is the Deputy Director, Socioeconomic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP, joining us tonight on Newsnight.